Okay. Good morning, everybody. I'm Brandon Hudson, Training Program Manager in the Office of Leader and Culture Development. I think most of you I have met before on various things, webinars or in person. I'm glad you are with us today. I'm in a little bit different space. It feels cavernous. And so can everybody hear me okay? Anybody not hear me? How would you know? That's a dumb question. Thank you, Shelley.
Hey,
By the way, I do know her name is Shelby, just to be clear. All right, so today we are talking about intellectual partners. And I started thinking about this because it was on a magazine that came to my house. My wife's a therapist, and a Psychology Today article was framing this idea of intellectual partnership. And so before we start defining that and talking about why it matters, I want to start with a Slido. And the first question is, how many people would you call a true intellectual partner? And if you are uh, not familiar with Slido, you can scan that QR code, or you can go to slido.com and join using that number. There is no space on that number between those two, the 8 and the 0. Okay. All right. 4 people so far. And most of you would say 1 to 2, 3 to 5. So most people who are responding would consider that they have 1 to 2 intellectual partners. I mean, partner kind of indicates just one, but they could be different partnerships. So that's fair. Well, let's talk about what that means and why it matters. If you want to chime in on the chat, that's also great, or interrupt me, also perfectly acceptable. I can't totally keep my eyes facing you and seeing what's happening, so you may have to get noisy. So the whole idea of an intellectual partnership is that two heads are better than one, though I like the phrase two heads beat one. That sounds like some sort of fight we're having. And what had happened was that the author of this article was talking about his dad, and his dad had a friend through work, and they were both uh, old friends. They had a weekly lunch, sandwiches and drinks. One of them called it a friendship, the other called it a 20-year partnership. Um, a lot of us have friends who are intellectual partners, but we may not think of them as that. We may think of them as dear friends. But I want to give us the vocabulary today to think about intellectual partnership and to be um, more intentional about building those relationships. An intellectual partner is more than a coworker. It is, you don't just have a shared task list or a shared planner dashboard. You don't just think about the same things, you share a way of thinking. And it's different than friends. It's often built on the work itself, not just on a fondness for each other. And it's intimate, but it's not romantic. Lifelong, it's outside your family, though I have some questions about that. And it's specific to the thing you're both chasing. So it encompasses learning, probing, challenging, and celebrating the thing two people are most passionate about together. And it's often a relationship we have not intentionally named. So, first thing, second thing right here, I want you to name in the chat or pop on verbally who are some famous intellectual partnerships that you think of? Okay, thank you, Shelby. I'll give you one to get started. John Lennon and Paul McCartney. Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce. Yeah, excellent. Spoken like a true Red Raider who can recognize that one. Winfrey and King. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Shelby, that's great. You don't think like that, but that's what we're kind of trying to generate today. There's only one podcast I listen to regularly, and Lane's not on here right now. I do listen to the podcast that comes out of my office, but the one I have somewhat fanatical devotion to is called the Lonely Island Seth Meyers podcast. And it's really about a trio of guys, Akiva Schaffer, Jorma Taccone, and Andy Samberg, who have been friends since middle school, but they have a comedy troupe called The Lonely Island, and they make movies and shorts together. And it's fascinating to listen to them break down how things got made. Um, don't listen to it in front of children if you do check it out, just FYI. Uh, but it is always for the betterment of the product. Now they're friends also, but they are partners. Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. Yeah, absolutely. Wozniak is the big teddy bear that makes Jobs palatable. If you are anything familiar with Apple computers, Jobs is one of the rare people who got fired from his own company and then rehired. Perfect. Okay, let's talk about a few of them. Some of these have been mentioned, but I want to talk about some of these and how they work differently before we get into how we can build our own and maintain our own. So, Kahneman and Tversky is a very famous psychological duo. Really, a lot of modern psychology has been based on the work they produced together. Lennon and McCartney. Uh, One of the reasons that Yoko Ono gets a bad rap is because it changed the dynamic of that relationship, is the uh, perspective. Marie and Pierre Curie, who are doing radiology together, two famous physicists. The Gottmans are relationship experts. Another one of my favorites, Tina Fey, Amy Poehler, who found each other in Chicago and formed a deep friendship that became based around the work. And then, if you've ever heard of Freakonomics, the story of that, of Dubner and Levitt, is one of people who didn't really have a lot in common until it came to the work. So, anybody got any questions about kind of what I'm talking about when I talk about an intellectual partner? Okay, in the chat, tell me if you had to name it right now, who is your intellectual partner? Past, present, doesn't matter. Drop the first name or the initials if you don't want to put their full name in the chat, and add one word for what they do for your thinking. Okay, Rachel, my sister, challenges thinking and thought process, makes me strive for more. Great. My wife, she often thinks the same things that I'm thinking. Great. Coworkers help gain perspective, push you to be better. Sister, provide different purposes. Push someone who pushes you outside your comfort zone. Perfect. Best friend, come to her with anything. She can help me level set. Okay, great. Those are all good examples. Um, it's kind of an interesting phenomenon. A lot of us work in systems where we often don't get a lot of say over our coworkers. And so this isn't on the slides. I'm just kind of thinking out loud. I think there's a really interesting line between friendship and intellectual partnership. Some of the intellectual partners mentioned in that previous slide are actually husband-wife duos or spouse duos. Sometimes they're not. I think uh, I think it can really vary. My wife and I were both in the same line of work and still have a lot of overlap in what we do. So we end up talking a lot about making each other's work better. And I think what makes an intellectual partnership, a lifelong one, very interesting is that it's rare. I mean, McCartney and Lennon are both musicians. McCartney writes about the fact that he's left-handed and Lennon's right-handed. So when they play together, it's like a mirror image of one another. I think one of my best friends, he and I, we talk about a lot of stuff. I wouldn't consider him an intellectual partner because he and I aren't building the same thing. We're not working towards the same goal. But another one of my lifelong friends, even though we don't work on the same things anymore, I would consider him an intellectual partner because we have created work together that matters. So I wonder if we start to define an intellectual partner as someone who helps us not only balance our lives and gain perspective and push outside our comfort zone, but also ultimately creates a work product or a product or process that is better than we could have arrived at on our own. Happy for any feedback on that. This is kind of me thinking out loud about what's the difference between where's the line between a friend and a partner intellectually. One of the things that is in common in all of your answers is that uh, they are both thinking along the same lines and they're pushing you. And I think that's true. And I think that's one of the things that makes a good intellectual partner. And I want to talk a little bit about the science behind that. So I love a Venn diagram. I love that there's something unique happening in the space between these two circles that doesn't take away from the individual nature of either circle, but it is greater than the respective parts. So let's talk a little bit about the science behind intellectual partners. The first is that collective intelligence is real. Now, I'm going to sidebar this and tell you collective stupidity is also real. There's a reason we talk about mob mentality. I used to be a pastor, and the first church I served, I would often describe as great individuals who are pretty horrible when they get together. Any of y'all know anybody who, or any groups, bunch of great individuals, but when they get together, they tend to make bad choices or behave poorly? Yeah. The more we learn about what we used to just call peer pressure, we now understand has I'm fascinated by the concept of mirror neurons, that we pick up on this energy from one another in a real measurable way. And one of the things about intellectual partners and just who we surround ourselves with, period, is that collective intelligence and the lack thereof is real. Science magazine, or the journal Science, researchers studied roughly 700 people working in pairs, and there was a real and measurable group IQ that showed up across different tasks. So, like, my wife is an intellectual partner for me, and she is much better at ordering things than I am. And I'm much better at thinking of things that are hard to order. I know that when we get together, we create something that neither one of us will create individually. And that would be measurable if we were working on a task together. My friend John and I, the same way. He's a musician, like classically trained, and my undergrad's in English. And when we get together, we're creating something from our different areas of expertise that we're both passionate about, but it's not bound by the limitations either one of us had. So one of the things that happens is when we get together, we begin to think differently. We begin to gain some sort of extra intelligence. The second finding, scientific, is that saying it out loud makes it real. When we are around other people and we have to explain our thought process, we become sharper than when we allow those ideas just to rattle around in our head. Melissa Koenig has done research called the protege effect. So students who had to teach material put in more effort in learning it, and then were able to better understand the material. I think we've seen this a lot across studies, that those who, one of the best ways to learn material is to prepare to teach it. So I wonder if you would answer in the chat or chime in. Do you have a person you think out loud with? And how does that shape your thinking? Your wife helps you see different perspectives. Taylor, thanks. Yeah, talking it through allows for personal growth and communication. Absolutely. I know for some of us who live in our head pretty easily, having to make something real with words creates an entirely different dynamic. And sometimes even just saying it out loud doesn't require the pushback of another person. It's just once we hear it, we go, oh, wait, let me try that again. Kim, yeah, sometimes the situation, that's why therapy, I really believe in it. Sometimes I've just gone to a therapist and been like, here's all these things. And then I'm like, oh, never mind. I've paid you to hear me talk, which is fine. Yeah, absolutely. The other thing that happens when we do that and we have a partner is it gives us a baseline of accountability. When someone else is counting on us, it helps us to push through the things that we might give up on if it was just us. Uh, any of you have any solo projects you're working on right now with no accountability that you've been putting off for a while because you just don't want to do the parts that aren't fun? Cleaning the garage. Oh, yeah, garages. Yeah, I've had a lot of jobs in the past where uh, I didn't have great intellectual partners. I didn't have people I could bounce ideas off of. And when I got to hard parts of any particular task, it made it really hard to continue. Uh, just stop doing that and start something else. It's one way to avoid doing things. Yeah. When McCartney writes about working with Lennon, he talks about it as pure ricochet. One line, then the other, back and forth. Fay and Polar say the same thing. When you have an intellectual partner you've had for a while, and they could be at your job, they could be a spouse, they could be a friend, but someone who knows your work and knows you, you get a shorthand. And the reality is that that rhythm is earned. It's not immediate. You can't jump into an intellectual partnership because trust is what makes it work. No intellectual partnership works without trust. One of the things this article got to that we won't get into a lot today is the growing use of AI as an intellectual partner. Have any of you used some artificial intelligence client as a thinking partner? Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Yeah, me too. I've used several different ones. The data coming out about that is interesting because you can teach any artificial intelligence program how to talk to you, but the default for most of them is to be really, really nice. Um, and so I remember one time when I was in grad school, I turned in a paper that was, like a 20-page paper that I wrote the night before. And when it came back to me, it was just covered in red ink. And both the TA and the professor were like, come on, man, you can do better. It was brutal. It was embarrassing. AI, unless I have told it explicitly to, will never give me that. I could give it some thoughts I have that are jumbled and not my best work. And AI will say things like, oh, yeah, that's a great job. And the data is coming to show us that when AI is nice, it's more error prone, which is why if you were a part of I think my very first webinar was about whiskey business. And one of the things about building a team is kindness instead of niceness, because kindness tells the truth. And you have to be able to trust your intellectual partner. And that means two things. It means you have to be able to trust them to tell you the truth, and you have to trust them to hold your bad ideas. Um, we talk a lot about psychological safety to the degree it's kind of become one of those words that maybe doesn't mean as much, but you need a space to put out your most far-fetched ideas where they won't be held with contempt, where they'll be held with kindness, including telling you they're bad ideas or they need more work. But without the idea that you will be judged as a person if you happen to have a bad idea. So trust, and it works both ways. If you are an intellectual partner, if you have one, you have to be able to tell people when things are not their best work, when they're not fully baked. Um, because we live in a world that is so performance based. And the best work, in my opinion, I don't care if you're in accounting or if you are an artist, the best work doesn't begin, even performance work doesn't begin performatively. It begins as something that's authentic and true and in this flow state. And when we are performing for others, we don't get to those deepest things, which is why we need these intellectual partnerships. Anybody got any questions? Or comments? We take them both. Great partnerships share four essential things: respectful engagement, task enablement, make your work better, not just your mood, trust, the reliability plus care. And my favorite is this bottom one, playfulness. Um, often we think about uh, work as it can be drudgery, but the best work, the best intellectual partnerships create this sense of joy. Um, and I would wonder if you could chime, do you have anybody you work with? I want to break out of the intellectual partner, but someone you create work with that brings you joy in the creation or in the process? And how? I would love to hear how. Okay. So you're all joy. Oh, okay, good. Thanks, Shelby. You and me and Lane on our team to make sure things are looking better every time we do it. Good. Yeah, you too. Absolutely. Um, I would ask then a follow-up question. All my coworkers, because we generally seem to care about each other's lives. Yeah. The dean's administration assistant. I don't know if y'all can tell that I'm reading a TV far away from me as I squint at it. Um, awesome, supportive of all my ideas. Good. Fun to be around even when things are so busy. Yeah, it's okay to have fun at work. Not everything is serious. Not everything is rocket surgery. So you should laugh. Smile goes a long way. Yeah, absolutely. Are y'all familiar with Jimothy, the short-spined raccoon? Have you seen that? You have to look it up if you haven't seen it. Yeah. So Jimothy should not be alive. Most creatures with a shortened spine disease, yeah, shouldn't be alive. Jimothy is a raccoon, and if a normal raccoon is like this long, I'm trying to see if I'm in frame here. This raccoon is like this long, and so it makes him really tall to his length. And you can find videos of him running around and like eating food and doing raccoon things. And he is a real blessing to the earth. I mean, it's a real gift. Uh, look him up if you haven't seen it. And here's a bonus I learned from my workmates yesterday. There's a Halloween costume of Jimothy. There we go. Yeah, that's Jimothy in the chat right there. Oh, this may be just the fact that Jimothy's joined the chat may make this one of my favorite webinars. Um, yeah, what a weird little dude. He's like those dogs that are so ugly that they're cute. He's super famous. Yeah. And what an intellectual partner Jimothy would be. You could just have him running around in your office. I think being able to joke about things, knowing these things, like it's super funny. We had this whole like sidebar about Jimothy yesterday. I don't even know why, but one of the things that happened is while that may not have been high on task enablement, yeah, there's the Jimothy cartoon. Um, it looks like someone maybe just took a Quasimodo uh, costume and was like, "Hey, what if we put a tail on it?" The Again, I don't know what Jimothy had to do anything, so it may not have anything to do with this, except for it creates trust and playfulness in our group when we're able to joke about something in our team. I would also be curious when we get off Jimothy for a second, his spine won't support it. Um, in your current work culture, in your current team, of these four things, respectful engagement, task enablement, trust, and playfulness, what do you think is the weakest on your current team? Trust. Oh, before I comment on that, full attention. Oh, yeah. Uh, these four pieces come from the work of organizational scholar Jane Dutton, and trust is the backbone. Uh, and Kendra, I wonder if, and you don't have to answer this, but I would wonder in any system where trust is low, how uh, certainly how playful you can actually be, how much joy can be there, um, how much respect there is without trust, how much task enablement. I think when trust is low, it creates a whole different um, dynamic. In a couple of weeks, I don't think I'm doing a webinar next week, but in a couple of weeks, maybe three, we're going to do a two-part series on anxious organizations. And I think there's so much in our world that breeds anxiety that it begins to be a part of the cultural milieu and how we can interact with that. Because I think often people acting out of anxiety are antithetical to really safe, trusting spaces. Full attention, man. I get that. Like we are very distracted people, so it's hard, and it's a discipline to give people our full attention. I was pulling up to Canes the other night, and my daughter works at Minchie's, so similar kind of industries. But I was pulling up to Canes, and inside the front window there was like a classroom teacher thing almost of like cell phone pockets. Like when I was in school, we used to put calculators in them, but now people put cell phones in them, and it was like numbered pockets where workers came in and they had to put their cell phones. And I wondered, first of all, what was the adherence rate to that? And second of all, what was, how did that change the culture of the workplace, not only to customers, but among one another? And what similar things might we be able to employ? Okay, real quick exercise in the chat. I want you to think of something you're stuck on right now. And I want you to imagine the intellectual partner that you've named in the room is in the room. And maybe it's something you haven't talked to the intellectual partner about. What is one question they would ask you? Why is this difficult for you? Oh, Lisa, I want to ask, do you think that's a helpful question? Like, how does that question help you? What's the worst thing that could happen? Where's the fear around this? Yeah. Have you explored every scenario? Good. I think I'm going to project a little bit. And Lisa, if you're answering that, I'm sorry if I'm projecting over what you're about to answer, but I think why is this difficult for you is a chance to reflect because sometimes we create our own difficulties that aren't really there. I love worst case scenario games. What's the worst could happen? Why is this fearful? Like I tell my kids sometimes and myself, not necessarily. Yeah. I tell my kids sometimes, like, and myself, that, you know, yes, I understand this is like a tense situation, but they can't take your birthday away. Like, nobody can steal your birthday. So, I mean, like, let's get some perspective. Yeah, thank you all for sharing. So, an intellectual partnership is not just a joint mind, it's two different minds on purpose. Um, as I was talking about my friend John earlier, there's distinct expertise when we work on something. Uh, he teaches choral conducting in Iowa, and I went to a class of his once up there, and I was like, "Bro, I didn't understand anything that just happened, but I liked it because we have similar taste, and so we can approach projects with, um, you know, a similar outcome and goal in mind, without bringing the same exact expertise." The One of the things that's great about the Gottmans were are relationship experts, and one wanted to apply game theory to something, and the other wanted to study the emotions of it. And it created one of the most reliable systems for relationship therapy. Sometimes the friction is where the magic happens. Now, all of this takes time. The greats had ruptures. I would say one of the great intellectual partnerships is the lead members of the band Oasis, Liam and Noel Gallagher. Uh, they have broken that band up multiple times because they just don't get along. But the music they make can be really awesome. A lot of building an intellectual partnership takes time and it has friction. It can be disruptive. It can include fights and it can be clumsy. As I was thinking through this, one of the things that it really brought to mind is about becoming intentional about building intellectual partnerships. Shelby's right. I'm very fortunate to work in a small team where we bounce a lot of ideas off each other. Um, But I started thinking about my friend John a lot and where our careers have taken us, what we've been up and down and through. And I thought, man, I wonder, as awkward and formal as it might be, if we could reestablish some formality that happened naturally when we were closer together to to kind of re foster this intellectual partnership. So I think for me, and maybe for you, I hope for you, I'm convinced of the importance of an intellectual partnership and that things become better when we work on them together. I know myself and know that there needs to be intentionality around that for me. So checking in on purpose, clarity around who owns what, and then the assumption that I'm getting more out of it than I'm giving. So I would ask, as kind of a uh, winding up, do you have some one person you could reach out to this week? And it may be someone you've already named. Um, it may be someone you haven't thought of. Do you have one person you could reach out to this week who you think could become an intellectual partner or who is an intellectual partner that you could spend some time intentionally developing that relationship for the betterment of you both? Okay, Kendra, awesome. JM, good. Haley, I really hope that cat is an actual cat. I think it's probably a person because you capitalized it, but I hope that cat is your Jimothy. I appreciated that. Okay, well, then the follow-up question to that is, even if you didn't put a name in the chat, how likely are you to actually reach out to that person this week? I was really hoping somebody would give me the already did. Ah, excellent. Excellent. You know, I think we live, and we talk about this in our office a lot. We live in a world that is increasingly lonely. There's a loneliness epidemic, and it doesn't have to be that way, but it takes more intentionality than ever to create things that maybe used to happen organically. There's a lot that people use to divide us, but I think the world is ready for a re-burgeoning of super creative intellectual partnerships that create a better world for you, your partner, and everyone. So thanks for listening to me kind of process through this. Um, Again, it's kind of a new topic for me, and I hope it has at least sparked an interest in you to go out and create those relationships Thank you for your time today. Like I said, I'll send out, well, it didn't say this. I'll send out the follow-ups later on. And I hope you find your partner. I hope you build that relationship. And I hope to see you in a few weeks when we talk about anxiety and how we can combat that in the systems we're a part of. Thank you all for being here.
Brendan, have a good day.
You too, Tanya. Thanks. Good to see you.